To those of you who have read a book entitled The Making of Star Trek, I am known and remembered as the person who wrote the so-called funny memos. I did other things besides writing memos, such as torturing Gene Roddenberry, driving studio executives crazy, and in my spare time helping to produce the show. Some people, including myself, refer to me as the former Bob Justman. This second description, while essentially correct, is somewhat of a misnomer as it doesn't go quite far enough. I prefer to think of myself as the once and future Bob Justman, a characterization which lends a certain nobility to my reputation as a legendary figure in the arcade art of nonsense writing. You see, I didn't stop writing memos after the original Star Trek series went out of production. No, instead I became emboldened by my success, or lack of retribution, and continued laboring to improve my memo writing craft as I moved from studio to studio and show to show. In fact, I was not only successful in tormenting studio executives, I became a thorn in the side of television network executives as well. I also succeeded in drawing others, producers, and a few, make that very few, studio executives into my memo writing addiction, which sometimes resulted in a series of memos from and to me, all of which focused upon such important matters as the proper care and feeding of basset hound puppies. But enough about Bob Justman, the former memo writer. Let's talk about Bob Justman, the current memo writer. Those among you who are silly, and I must say, since you're actually here and am cautious enough to listen, that most of you are quite silly indeed, have come here on purpose. A few others, I have to assume, wandered into this room by mistake. I hereby give them leave to go, or is it leave to leave? English certainly is an imprecise language, isn't it? Anyhow, now is the time for those few trespassers to go while the going's good. After that, the going gets bad, because I'll get going on what I was going to go on about when I first got going. Are you still with me?
Yes.
And if so, why? Ah, yes, because, unlike me, you're all as silly as can be. Let me see, where was I? Oh, yes, I was here, and I'm still here. And I'll be here later, too, as will you, seeing as how you were silly enough to come and listen in the first place. So I'll be here, and I'll probably, make that definitely, still be speaking about memos. Some of you might know that I rejoined Gene Roddenberry. No, he wasn't coming apart. I rejoined Gene Roddenberry when Paramount Pictures decided finally to go ahead and make a new Star Trek series. It was a noble and altruistic gesture on the studio's part, motivated, no doubt, by its heartfelt desire to make all the Trekkers in the world happy. And coincidentally, to make $1 billion, trillion, zillion dollars in profits, which would in turn make Paramount's management happy too. Make that incredibly happy. So we innocents, just happy to be back together again, eagerly went to work creating Star Trek: The Next Generation, and devising ways to make it not only worthy of the original series, but hopefully even better, now that we were a whole lot smarter than we used to be, if such a thing is possible. And now that the technical aspects of filmmaking had been improved upon to such an extent. Working with Gene again was a joy for both of us. It was as if we went home one night in 1969 and came back to work the following morning in 1986. Other than the fact that the faces before the cameras were different, for me, the show was just like the old one, because it was still about what matters most to the human race. Morality, tolerance, doing unto others. Oh, wait a second. I'm beginning to get serious. Let's have no more of that. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to talk about memos. Well, there we were, working together again, just like in the old days. And, just like in the old days, I began to write memos. Now, since the people who wandered in here by mistake have probably all left, right? The rest of you are all silly enough to stay and listen as I read some of the memos that I wrote to various victims during the production of the first season of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Here they come, and in no particular order. This first one followed many serious memos I had written and was addressed to everyone working on the new show, and it went as follows. To all concerned, date July 23, 1987, from Bob Justman, subject, memos. Things are going so well that I have decided not to write any memos today. The next memo was addressed to Cosmo Genovese, our script clerk. It went to him because he complained that he was the only one of the entire crew who wasn't sent the first memo. This one went as follows. To Cosmo Genovese, date July 24, 1987, from Bob Justman, subject, Cosmo memo. Things went so well yesterday that I've decided not to write another memo today. Therefore, the memo that I would ordinarily have written to you today, because I didn't send you a copy of the one I wrote yesterday, will definitely not be written. Don't expect one tomorrow either. There are two reasons for that. First, I don't know how badly tomorrow will go yet, so I don't know how much need there will be for me to write a memo to you. Second, tomorrow is Saturday. It's a day of rest for all of us, a religious holiday for some, but not for you unless you're hiding something from me. And besides, you won't even be here. Come to think of it, neither will I. That was the end of that memo. The next memo that I'll inflict upon you was addressed to Gene Roddenberry, and it contained my notes on a script written by Hannah Shearer, a new Star Trek writer. Or rather, a writer new to Star Trek because, for all I know, she might have been writing for years before she came to work with us. To Gene Roddenberry, date December 21, 1987, from Bob Justman, subject, Coming of Age, formerly known as Starfleet Academy, revised final draft dated 12/21/87. That's December 21st, 87. You people who do things backwards. And it went as follows. A nice, clean rewrite job delivered with dispatch by the talented and mysterious Hannah Shearer. Until I met her last Saturday night at the Star Trek Christmas party, I wasn't certain that she did, in fact, exist. She came up to me, bold as brass, and introduced herself. Now, she claimed to be Hannah Louise Shearer, but she offered no proof. Ever on the alert, I smiled and pretended to accept her statement as truthful. But I wasn't fooled, not even for a minute. No writer is that pleasant or charming. It's just not in their nature. So it was easy for me to deduce that she was an android or a computer-generated illusion. Somewhere, lurking behind one of the hot food tables, probably the Mexicanish one, was the real Hannah Louise Shearer, undoubtedly a snaggle-toothed, disgusting critter with foul breath and writing calluses on all the fingers of all her hands. Anyhow, I cleverly avoided looking directly into the imposter's eyes, lest she weave a spell over me, and got rid of her as fast as possible. One of these days I'll meet the real Hannah Louise Shearer, and I'll regret it. But now back to our story. And I then went on to discuss the script in detail, as was my wont. There were, however, a few tasty tidbits interspersed amongst the remaining pages of serious literary criticism. Here's one of them. I have found a typographical error and pounced upon it gleefully. Page 13, scene 7. I've got the proof. Look at the middle of Chang's major oration. See it? The only word that android writers can't spell is Starfleet. They spell it Starlfeet. Now, Starls are mute android house pets with very large, smelly feet. They never take off their shoes and socks even when they bathe once a year. That's why their owners lock them inside the shower and move to new planets to write television episodes. I'll bet the Hannah Shearer simulation has left a whole slew of smelly, sweaty Starls sequestered singly in steaming showers scattered among the shimmering, shining stars. After more pages of serious stuff in which I actually tended to business, I finished the memo thusly, and the person named John Pike, to whom I will refer, is the president of Paramount's network television division, or was until a week ago when he got fired. Despite the length of this memo, I've actually had much less to carp or crab about than usual. The world's my oyster, and I'm happy as a trout, So I'm not going to clam up and flounder around. I'm going to perch right here and say that maybe we better start chumming and bait our hooks to find ourselves some more shrimpy androids like Hannah Louise Shearer to write a whale of a tale for John Pike and us, because I'm fed up to the gills with most of the fish stories we've reeled in so far this season. We need caviar, not salmon eggs. The above remarks were said on purpose and not just for the halibut. Evidently, as many of you by now have deduced, I can be not only silly, I sometimes resort to the use of terrible puns. Actually, all puns are terrible, because if they weren't, people wouldn't groan when they hear one, and secretly wish they had thought of it themselves. Getting back to memos and the writing of same, just the other day I came across one that I wrote on July 15, 1966, during production of the original series. It was addressed to John D.F. Black, our associate producer story editor. Mr. Black, being a newcomer to the show, had inquired as to proper terminology for use in describing the immense distances that the good ship Enterprise had to traverse on its journeys into outer space. I set him straight in the following epistle. To John D.F. Black, date July 15, 1966, from Bob Justman, subject Star Trek Semantics. Dear John, perhaps the following information might be of use to you and your host of talented writers. The prefix tera attached to a word denotes a number followed by 12 zeros. The prefix giga denotes a number followed by 9 zeros. The prefix mega denotes a number followed by 6 zeros, and the prefix kilo denotes a number followed by 3 zeros. The prefix deca denotes a numeral on a record album. John D.F. Black was not the only new arrival at Star Trek. Gene Coon was due to come on board in early August of 1966. We were very anxious to make that desperate, to avail ourselves of our new producer's prodigious writing skills. Gene Roddenberry was concerned that an office would be ready and waiting upon Gene Coon's arrival so that our savior could go right to work. My concern was that, with two men named Gene on the show, some confusion might result. So I took care of things by hiring a secretary for Gene Coon and furnishing an office for our new writer-producer. Then I sent the following. To Gene Roddenberry, date August 4, 1966, from Bob Justman, subject Gene Coon. Dear Gene, as per our previous discussion regarding Gene Coon earlier this week, you'll remember that I told you, Gene Roddenberry, that Gene Coon's office will be ready for him by the time Gene Coon reports. Gene, when Gene reports on Monday, Gene will find that his office is ready and waiting for him. I hope this meets with your approval, Gene. Regards, Gene Justman. Copies to Gene D.F. Black, Gene Whidden, Gene Solo, Gene Perlstein, Gene Geller, Gene Gantman, Gene Fontana, Gene Stillwell, Gene Smith, Gene Peters, Gene Glick, Gene DeAugusta, Gene Davis, and Gene Coon. I'll just digress for a second. So I remembered that when I set up his office for him, I also hired a secretary for him. Her name was Andy Richardson, and she was the first black secretary ever to work for a producer at Paramount. This was sort of groundbreaking. And so, therefore, she was Gene Coon's secretary. He was delighted with her. And she was delighted because she was therefore able, whenever the phone rang, to pick it up and answer it in the following manner with a deep Southern fried accent. She would say, "Coon's office." Not only were there memos, there were letters and lots of them. In no particular order, here are excerpts from a few. Julie King, a fan from Minnesota, with whom I later corresponded, and in fact still do, wrote to compliment us for casting female actresses to perform pivotal roles in Star Trek The Next Generation. As a postscript, she said that she had a 20-cent bet riding on how Geordi's visor is attached to his head. I replied, "Would you believe that we could attach Geordi's visor to his head with Phillips head screws?" No? How about carpet tacks? No? Industrial staples? No, still no. My, you're a smart one, aren't you? Okay, I confess, it's magnetism. We surgically implanted tiny ceramic magnets into both sides of LeVar's head. The visor, made of a ferrous alloy, clicks right into place as soon as it's within range. His contract reads that we have to pay for removing the magnets when the series ends, but I think he's gotten used to it and wants to keep them forever. Okay, you win your bet. We use thin black elastic cord looped around his head, and yes, his hair hides this fact from the viewer. I think I deserve at least 10 cents of your winnings for this info. P.S. How are things in Lake Wobegon? Another young female fan from a town in Oregon with the improbable name of Milton Freewater, the town's name, not hers, wrote to complain about Consular Troy's copious cleavage. I responded to the effect that, all things being equal, I'd rather deal with Marina's cleavage than Dr. Crusher's hair, a problem which had assumed epic proportions during the first season. I also stated that I didn't believe in the existence of a community with such an unbelievable name. The fan wrote back to thank me for my response and to invite me to visit to her hometown. Naturally, I felt obliged to reply. If you keep writing to thank me for writing to you, then I'll have to keep writing to you to thank you for thanking me. And then you'll write back to thank me for writing to you, to thank you for writing to me, to thank me for writing to you, and so on. So let's make a deal. You stop writing to me to thank me for writing to you, and I'll stop writing to you to thank you for writing to me, to thank me for writing to you. Is that clear? Choose one of the following. Neatness counts and you will be graded. 1, yes. 2, no. 3, sometimes. Although I'm sure it would be most interesting to visit your home in fabulous northeastern Oregon, I have a tendency to shy away from towns that have both a first and last name, especially then with those with dumb first names like Milton. Why don't you change its name to something like Freddie Freewater or Philomena Freewater? Alliteration has charms to soothe the savage breast. Oops, excuse me. I wasn't going to bring up the subject of cleavage again, but now that I have, my wife, whom you invited also, has some pretty mean cleavage too. In closing, allow me to thank you for the invitation and also for writing to thank me for writing to you. So here goes. Thanks, Robert Justman. No doubt you can imagine what happened then. Yes, she wrote to me again saying, amongst other things, I'm very happy to hear about your wife's cleavage. She probably got mine by mistake. She then went on to say that they have a nickname for their town, which is Muddy Frog Water, and that if, quote, Oregon doesn't ring your chimes, we could move 7 miles north to Walla Walla, Washington, unquote. Then she closed by saying, don't write us off just yet, Robert. We need another truck driver this wheat harvest. Well, I did it. I wrote back immediately and said in reply, Dear Sir or Madam, X, Robert H. Justman. P.S. I don't do wheat, but rutabagas, that's a whole nother story. P.P.S. This is Rapid Robert's wife speaking. Please don't write to him anymore. He's very compulsive and feels that he must answer every letter he receives, no matter what it's about. Writing letters exhausts him, and he gets very irritable and won't drink his hot milk or take his nap after he finishes writing. He just flops down, beats his little feet on the floor, and screams, I don't want a nappy poo, and I won't drink my milky poo, so there. So please, no more letters. I'll be eternally grateful, the Mrs. As I mentioned earlier, Julie, the fan from Minnesota, was another one of my favorite victims. She made the mistake of sending me a postcard with a photo on it of a lake in Minnesota that she claimed was Lake Wobegon. She also referred to the Chinese fortune cookie fortune that she had neglected to include in her last letter. I'm a collector of fortune cookie fortunes. I didn't think you knew that, but it's very important for you to know. Do you know what they are? You know the little twisty cookies with a little piece of paper inside with the silly thing that says Hong Kong Noodle Factory on it, and on the other side gives a fortune? Well, she also made the grave error of referring to herself as a bubblehead. She shouldn't have done that. I wrote, Dear Boobyhead, I mean bobblehead, I mean boobyhead, I mean Dear Sir or Madam. It took me a while, but I finally deciphered your handwriting, awful but not as bad as mine. and now understand that you refer to yourself as Bubblehead. I, for one, beg to differ with you. You are definitely not a Bubblehead. Dunderhead maybe, but not a Bubblehead. There, I hope you feel, makes you feel a lot better. You're a dunderhead because any fool, even me, can see that the really cheap postcard you sent does not display a photograph of Lake Wobegon. No, it's a picture of 3 pine trees situated right near the end of the world. I know it's the end of the world because the water just ends in the background and there's no horizon at all. Now, since the world is flat, if you set out in a rowboat to row to the other side of that so-called lake, you'd find yourself rowing right over the edge, and you'd fall a zillion trillion miles straight down and never reach bottom. Thanks for the fortune you were so tardy in sending. Although it sounds good at a first reading, quote, the smart thing is to prepare for the unexpected, unquote, what it advocates is totally erroneous. How can anyone in his, her, or its right mind prepare for the unexpected? Think about it. If you can prepare for something, it can't be unexpected. Get it? No wonder you're a dunderhead. You believe anything you read in the Chinese fortune cookie. You can't do that. You have to be smart, like me. I believe the smart thing is to prepare for the expected. That makes a whole lot more sense. For instance, one day my wife told me that she was expecting a baby. So I prepared for the expected, and sure enough, one day a baby arrived. I wasn't at all surprised because I had prepared. What did surprise me was how she knew so many months in advance. Believe it or not, she did this several times. Will miracles never cease? Another thing that surprised me was that I never once got to see the story. Well, I guess it's time to end this letter now because I can hear them looking for me again. In closing, I'd like to quote 2 fortunes that I received years ago. The first one made the production that, quote, you are doomed to be happy in wedlock, unquote. The second one stated that, quote, tomorrow will be peppier, unquote. Robert H. Justman, P.S., at least you spelled Lake Wobegon correctly. P.P.S., dear Ms. King, I'm the head guy in the White Coat Brigade here at the rest home. Please, you've got to stop writing to this lunatic. All it does is encourage him because he's a letter-writing fool and he's so compulsive that he'll devise a new way to escape from his rubber room. As soon as he's free, he heads for the nearest computer and starts typing away. His motto is, word processes is us, and he sets to prove it every chance he gets. That's why they had to let him go from Star Trek. All he did was write letters, and he never did any work at all. When he wasn't writing letters, he was ordering Chinese food to take away, throwing out the food and saving the fortunes he found in those little twisty cookies. I guess you struck a nerve when you sent him one. He was thrilled. He yelled, hey look, I got a fortune and I didn't even have to order out. So please, have a heart, lighten up on the letters. That was the end of that one. And Miss King did try to lighten up on the letters, but I didn't. Later in another letter, I took her to task for her faulty spelling. I wrote, you spelled the word wrong. It's not deluxe, D-E-L-U-X. It's deluxe, D-E-L-U-X-E. Unless, of course, you're referring to laundry detergent. Like when you're at the laundromat and someone asks you to pass deluxe, please. Thank you. Later, during her last college semester, my Minnesota friend wrote to say, I can't wait till I graduate. Then I'll be free, and my life will be my own again. And I wrote back as follows. Wrong again. Your life will not be your own again after you graduate. There is no freedom in life after school, just as there is no balm in Gilead. Forget it. Oh, for a little while you'll be in a fool's paradise. You'll go to bed late and get up late, but soon enough you'll discover, as so many other countless millions of people did before you, that the grass is always greener, that the good old days were better, that events didn't press in upon you so much, that the rat race does include you, that they just don't build them as well today, that your old life was a saner, slower, sweeter time than what you suffer through now, that you never had it so good. In other words, the older you get, the more complicated life becomes, and the more the world will press in upon you. In future years, you'll look back upon your college life as a golden time, for it was. Those years were a major turning point in your life, perhaps the most major turning point of them all. It's a time when you pass from the throes of emotional and mental immaturity and first become the person you will turn out to be. What I have just written is not meant to discourage you. We all go through the process. I just don't want you to be too surprised by what the future will bring. Actually, the future will bring you unimagined rewards and a few regrets. The fun comes from the way you approach getting there. The regrets come from never having attempted what you could have or should have before you talked yourself out of it. My friends, whatever I said to my pen pal in Minnesota, I feel I can say to you. As the old adage goes, it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. I know you have ideals. Try to do whatever you secretly aspire to, even if it causes you to end a sentence with a preposition. You can make a difference. Perhaps you won't succeed, but at least you won't saddle yourself with regrets because you never gave it a try. Take a chance on life. Don't do it by hurting others, and of course, don't do it without preparing as well as you can. But after calculating the odds and assessing your chances and preparing well, follow your heart's desire. The future is bright, and you can be an important part of that bright future. Fellow silly people, it's getting late now, and I'm way overdue for my hot milk and nappy poo. In closing, I'd like to read one memo to you, the last one I ever wrote. I wrote it to everyone working on Star Trek The Next Generation. Halfway through that incredibly wearing first season, I informed both Gene Roddenberry and Paramount Pictures that 26 episodes would be more than enough for me, thank you, and that they should remember to forget, not to forget to remember to pick up my option for a second season. But I was very tired by the time Christmas rolled around, so I decided to take things easier right away by hanging up my supervising producer hat and finishing out the last 8 episodes as a consulting producer, whatever that is. Being a consulting producer means that instead of coming to work early and leaving late, you can come to work late and leave early, which is what I did. Then after a headline story in Daily Variety which reported that I had been booted from the show in a big shakeup, I wrote the following to our cast and crew. To everybody. Date January 14, 1988. From Bob Justman, subject, great job. Despite what you have read in a certain publication which supposedly double-checks the information that its sources have furnished it, yours truly is definitely not out. Out to lunch at times maybe, but not out of Star Trek. No, I've merely taken a new stance, one which allows me to do all the fun things I've always done on the show while avoiding all the naughty bits. Rick Berman gets to do the dirty work now, and I'm glad. You hear me? Glad, glad, glad. Now I have a lot more time to think about things in general and to get into more mystery. So I tried thinking for a while today, but it made me very tired and irritable. Being irritable is something that goes against my grain, as you all no doubt are aware. Certainly all of you know that I'm the sweetest, nicest, most gentle person in the world, and if you dare to disagree, it'll be your ass on a meat hook signed with a black hand. Anyhow, as I said, this thinking routine is definitely not good for me. It just plain tuckers me out. However, just before I gave up my thinking for today, I had a real thought. I fought that thought until I thought about the thought that I had thought, and then I bought the thought that before the thought comes to naught and I get overwrought, I ought to tell you about that one thought that I had thought. Think about the thought that had occurred to me. So, sorry, a lot of riffing. I mean, so here's my thought. I think that all of you, cast, crew, and other aliens, have done an absolutely smash-up job this season. You've all made Star Trek The Next Generation such a wonderful enterprise that I truly feel it's a better show now than it ever was in the past. I'm talking excellence, folks. You are all, without exception, true professionals, and I'm proud to be associated with you on this brave and hopefully lengthy new voyage into the future. Live long and prosper. That was my last Star Trek memo. During that first season of Star Trek The Next Generation, I stole a line from C.S. Forester's novel Captain Horatio Hornblower, for Patrick Stewart to speak at the end of an episode. You probably know by now that Gene Roddenberry based the character of Captain Kirk upon that famous fictional seafarer. Anyhow, the episode I referred to was nearly over, and everyone was back in position on board the starship. One of the bridge crew affirmed that course and speed were locked in and asked Picard for permission to leave orbit. It was time for the United Spaceship Enterprise crew to head out into the unknown for the next great adventure where no one had gone before. Captain Picard tugged at his tunic, settled back in his command chair, clenched his jaw, and with his eyes and noggin gleaming in anticipation, responded, "Make it so." Since what's good enough for Mr. Spock and Captains Horatio Hornblower, James T. Kirk, and Jean-Luc Picard is good enough for me, I say to all of you here, even the non-silly ones, and to trekkers everywhere, live long and prosper, and make it so. Thank you. Please, if you'd like to ask me some questions, and I'll attempt to prevent some lies immediately. Yes, sir.
Why did you get into the movies in the first place?
Why did I?
Yeah.
Well, it seemed like a good way to spend my time. It was doing films. And when I first got into movies, there was very little, if any, television, so I thought I was entering, upon a movie career. It satisfied the emotional and creative needs that I had, and in fact still have. It's a chance to do something that has some meaning, and to leave some footprints on the sands of time, which hopefully wouldn't be blown away immediately. It's a dirty job if someone has to do it, and besides, it pays well. Are there any other questions? If not, I'll drink my drink. Oh. Wait a second. This is a pim's cup. Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us how many nasal pads you have used so far?
I'm sorry?
How many nasal pads have you used?
How many what?
Memo pads.
Still can.
Memo pads.
Oh, I didn't use memo pads. Oh, no. What I did in the old days, Gene Roddenberry introduced me to a new machine that he used for writing his letters and also script for a while. And he taught me how to do it. It was a dictating machine. And what I would do is I would take the machine home with me every night where I did my reading, and then dictate my story memos into the machine. I could stop and back it up and erase and go over things. So I had my memos correct, and incidentally, my memos were quite long. In many cases, or most cases, actually longer than the stories on which I was writing, which drove the writer's crazy. But I would use this machine. Then I would bring the tape in to my secretary the following morning, my secretary Sylvia G. Smith, and she would put on the headphones and a little foot pedal, put the tape in her machine, and she would type these 10 or 20 pages, single-spaced pages of comments that I had dictated, at the same time answering phones and doing everything else while I attended to my other duties. And enabled me to get a lot of work done and then not have to worry about taking time out of the day to dictate. The type myself. So that's what I did in those days. In recent days, recent years, since the availability of home computers, I write all my memos and everything else, in fact, on computer, which enables me to polish and make corrections as I go without all of you. And it increases, certainly has increased my work capacity by, I would say, about 30%. It churn out 30% more annoying dribble than I did. Are there any other questions? No? Yes?
You said that line was taken from Hornblow. Whereabouts in Hornblow was it taken from? Because Captain Horatio Hornblow is an anthology of free
Right.
story.
It was in one of the three. It was somewhere between the first and last pages of one of those books. He said, make it so. And there was also another line that I gave Patrick, which Hornblow used, as I recall, which is when he turned to his first mate and they would weigh anchor and set sail, he would say, time and tide, time. Right? Meaning time and tide wait for no one, better be on your way. Are you praying or just gently praying? Any more questions? I'd really like to have some silly questions so I can be serious.
Whose idea was it to have Picard drinking hot Earl Grey tea?
To have Picard what?
Drink hot Earl Grey tea.
Oh, I don't know. That may have happened after the first season. Incidentally, I don't know, you probably heard the tale of how Patrick got to be on the show. You haven't? Well, someday you'll find out. Actually, I can tell you, because Patrick tells the story himself. My wife and I enjoy theater, and we also enjoy attempting to absorb information we haven't had before. We subscribe to a course of lectures and readings dealing with humor. And the course was given at the University of California, Los Angeles, known as Francis Foucault. And one evening we were attending a lecture and readings of Shakespeare, comedies, and Noel Coward. And two actors were there to do the readings. One of them was Patrick Stewart, whom I didn't recall, although I had seen him in several shows, including I, Claudius and doing something else. But I wasn't really aware of him. And in I, Claudius, he wore a hairpiece. And he came out and pushed his sleeves back on his brawny, muscular forearms, sat down in a chair. There was a British actress there. I can't recall her name. She was good. When Patrick started to read, holding the sides in his hand, she disappeared. All I could see was Patrick, and he mesmerized the audience. And as he started speaking, and he spoke no more than a line or two, I turned to my wife, who was sitting next to me, and I said, I found our captain. And after the lecture was over, I did some sleuthing, and I discovered who Patrick's agent was in Los Angeles, and arranged a meeting between Patrick, Gene Roddenberry, and myself. It took place at Gene Roddenberry's old house. And Gene was, Gene could be, very nice. And after Patrick left, said, I won't have him. And he was adamant that Patrick not be cast as the captain of the Enterprise, because Gene had created a character for the show in his own mind, on page, was a Frenchman. And we went through agony for months attempting to find the proper Frenchman to play the role. And we reached the point where I finally, in desperation, pretended that I had totally given up on Patrick. And I said, I want to hear no more about Patrick, because everybody on the show, except for Gene, wanted him. I want to hear no more about Patrick. Let's get on to other things, and we've got to find our captain, because we're only a few weeks away from filming. And that's what we did. We interviewed other actors, and I did try very desperately to find the right person for the role. Nobody satisfied us, and nobody satisfied Gene. But one day he turned to Rick and myself and said, well, I guess it's going to be Patrick. And then we had to show Patrick to the studio, to the head of Paramount Television, Mr. Pike, and his entourage. And Gene was nervous about whether Patrick would fill the bill and how were they going to react to a bald-headed actor in the lead role. You know, because all they could remember was Captain Kirk. So we had Patrick sent for his hairpiece, which was in residence in London. And the hairpiece arrived, and it was the rattiest looking thing. It was just horrible. Patrick put it on, and we all shook our heads and we decided, no, if we showed him to the studio brass wearing that hairpiece, that would be the end of it. They'd never accept it. So we took it off. He went to meet him, and they were like, they were sort of awed. They said, oh, what a marvelous idea. And so Patrick, against all of Gene's earlier objections, did become the captain of the Enterprise, and only because it was just an accident of fate that I happened to see him that one night at the college. Well, those are the kind of things that happen in show business. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes, I do collect it. Thank you. I used to. Oh, very good. Oh, no. Because what it says 38, 17, 429, 145. Oh, but on the other side is the real message.
It's a telephone number.
Did you get that, fellow? So I repeated.
38, 17, 145.
Very good. It says here, and there are two little smiling faces. The joyfulness of a man prolongeth his days. In which case, with a long time. I'm pretty joyful. Yes, there is a story, and no, it wasn't easily. Brent Spiner read several times, as did Eric, the Traveler, Eric Menyo. And to tell you the truth, we had them back, we read a lot of actors for that role. And Eric and Brent were our two contenders. And it came down to having to make a choice between the two of them, and our choice, as you undoubtedly will discover someday, was Brent Spiner. But we were still so taken with Eric that when we got the script in where no one had gone before, Rick and I both said, it's got to be Eric. And we went ahead and we cast. We didn't read anyone else for the role. We just cast him for the role of the Traveler, which he did to a turn. He was really marvelous. So that's the story. It might have been Eric, but it wasn't a flip of the coin. We just thought that there were certain qualities in Brent that we could utilize to flesh out what Gene's perception was. We used to think of Data as Pinocchio, constantly pointing out about the world, about people, and he's a total innocent. Any other questions? There were a number of casting things that did occur. The lady who played Tasha Yar was brought in to play the empath, to play our Counselor Troy. And the lady who was brought in to play Counselor Troy was cast to play Tasha Yar in the first season. We just swapped them because it seemed like that's the way it would work better. LeVar Burton got on the show because I had worked with him in the past, and I thought he would be just perfect for the role of Geordi. And although we did read other people, he was far and away the best of anybody we saw. So actually got the role. Will Wheaton, I was very much for, and we shouldn't blame Will for the kind of character that he played. You might be interested to know that the character started out as a boy teenager, and then became a girl teenager because I suggested to Gene that everyone has a boy teenager. It's just a natural thing to do. Why can't you have a girl teenager play the role and get into scrapes and such? And I had ideas that she would have her first sexual encounter on the show, all these kind of things. And at the last minute, Gene changed the character back to a boy, and so Wesley was reborn, and Leslie fit with us. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Why did you have
because we had a chief engineer on the original series, and we certainly didn't want to do a Scotsman, and we didn't find the right person, although several people did come along during the first season that I thought would be good. I thought Biff McGuire would make a good engineer, but it didn't kind of work out. We had so many roles already that it becomes difficult to handle that many people in the amount of time that an hour show encompasses. You might be surprised to know that an hour in television is only about 49 minutes. It's not an hour. It's 49 minutes of heavenly material and 11 minutes, 21 minutes, something of incredibly awful things like commercials and station breaks and like that, that just seem to interrupt and stop the action there. More questions? Yes?
I seem to remember from reading the original script, the writer's guide, that Worf really did not have a very big part, but his part seemed to grow through the first season. Was that because Michael Dorn really made a larger role for himself, became more well developed?
He was very good. Gene didn't want to have any Klingons in the show at all, in the new show. And I suggested to him that when I suggested to him that we have a Klingon in the crew, he said, no, I won't hear of it. I don't want Klingons. We've done Klingons. That's over. You know, he didn't want to trade upon the past that much. He wanted to break new ground. And I said, well, we can break new ground and show something very important by having a Klingon as a member of the Enterprise crew. And it hit home to him after a while. He thought about it for a while and came back and said, yes, I think that's a good idea. And that's how Worf came along. Worf, Michael, is a very good actor. And certainly he made it possible for us to devote more yardage to him than we ordinarily would have. Interesting character. He played his role well, and he does take stage very, very well. We had some problems. I don't know whether I should repeat this or not, but I will anyway. We had trouble casting that role. We wanted a black man to play the role. We thought that was important to do. The bar wasn't enough. There should be opportunities for other people, other kinds of people, to be in the show. And even though it's hard to tell what a person looks like underneath all that makeup, though we were seeing large black actors, and most large black actors in the States and Los Angeles haven't had classical training. They don't speak the King's English even as well as I do. They don't speak it well at all. They speak the language of the street. That's where they were born, that's where they've been brought up, and that has been their culture. It's a different culture than ours, but it's their culture. The problem was that the speech that Gene had written for the actors to try out for the role of Worf went as follows, and I'll speak to you the way I would speak. The situation is that the Enterprise has been attacked, and in order to protect the lives of the families of non-combatants aboard, Lieutenant Worf is detailed to take the saucer section of the ship and to race away towards safety while the main battle portion of the ship, the battle cruiser section, goes to face the enemy. The character was given this speech to say when he's told that this is what he's being detailed to do. He takes umbrage, he bristles, he rises to his full height, and he says, "Sir, for me to seek escape while my captain goes into battle, ... And it invariably came out as follows: "Sir, for me to seek escape while my captain goes into battle," and that's the way it came out. And we were going crazy trying to find someone who could declaim. You know, Star Trek at times is rather classical. So, and you have to have had some rep training in order to be able to do it correctly. And most of these actors hadn't had that experience, and they couldn't do it. Michael and one other actor were able to do it really well. And Michael was just that much better, that much more athletic, that much more commanding, and he got the role. And it turned out that we had worked together some years before, which I thought, nice man, excellent actor. The only one on the show, I think, that can play 2 roles in an episode, and you wouldn't know the difference because the one guy would make. Yes, sir.
When you were first considering the next generation so bad, did you have any well-known actors in mind for roles?
No. No well-known actors. We wanted actors that could play roles. We felt that the show is the star, and not the actors won't make the show. The show will make the actors, and I'm sure we were right. That's the way we went. Our biggest star was LeVar, yes. He was the one that was most well known in America. More questions? Yes, ma'am.
How did you pick the names of the characters? How did you settle on Paul and Jean-Luc Picard?
Gene selected the names for the most part, and he asked us for suggestions for what should the name of the character that's playing the android be, and we suggested all kinds of names, and he selected Data. So he asked us, we didn't take any of our suggestions. He knew the name. He wanted Jean-Luc Picard, named after the balloononaut. You know, Picard, the fellow who went up in the high altitude balloon back in the 30s and 40s. Was a French name, Picard. Let's see. Tasha, the name Tasha went through several evolutions. Came about a result of the film when Gene first called me to come, and Gene was a sly character. He didn't say, I'd like you to work on this new show, the new Star Trek. He said, why don't you come on by the studio? We're running some movies, getting some ideas, and why don't you come on by and we'll watch the movies together. So I knew what that meant. So I did go, and we saw the film Aliens, and there was a tough girl in Aliens. And Gene decided that he wanted to have a security chief who would be a female, and she would be Mexican, and her name would be Macha Hernandez, M-A-C-H-A, Macha. But when we ended up with our Tasha, it was evident that she couldn't be a Macha, but she was a good Tasha. What are some of the other names? Deanna Troy, I don't know where that name came from. Who else is in the show? Any more questions? Please, yes, miss? I'm sorry, you'll either have to scream or I'll have to get a hearing aid.
What does the T stand for?
What does the what stand for?
See.
Stands for his middle name. I'd like to think it stands, I don't know, I used to know. Thomas. I used to like to thought that it stood for Tecumseh, which was a great Indian warrior. Yes? Like a family. And it's not that Star Trek is any different from any other long-running production. You live with your fellow workers more than you live with your family. You spend, as I did, anywhere 12 to 16, sometimes 18 hours a day at the studio, filming 5 days a week, and you spend Saturday and Sunday at home reading and making notes. When you're with these people for so long, you become very close to them. It's very hard to part at the end of the production. It's always a very emotional time because we really like each other. You know, by the time we reach that point, we've come to a situation where everybody mates well with everyone else. We work well, very well together, and we care for each other because we're all going through hell while we're doing it. And one of the greatest satisfactions is that we have we've met and made such good friends. And that's the tough part about leaving anywhere when you're in the film business. I imagine other businesses are that way, but I don't think to such an extent. So there you have it. I take it there are no more questions. If there are no more questions, I hereby give you leave to leave. Thank you very much.